Good evening and Merry Christmas, and welcome to the Friday Symposium. I'm Diane Sare, LaRouche independent candidate against Chuck Schumer in 2022, and this is Christmas Eve. And I have a few things that I want to tell you before we will have some music and also a short video from Lyndon LaRouche, which is very appropriate to the season, but we are in a very dire crisis. And I think it's urgent that I tell you the situation. We are really pushing a nuclear war with Russia and similarly with China. And at the moment, the policy of the Biden administration withholding the $9.5 billion of the Afghan central bank in the New York Federal Reserve is pushing 23 million people in Afghanistan to their death through starvation. Now, you may say, what kind of a Christmas message is this? But my answer to that is, what is the point of Christmas, and why did God find it necessary to send his son to mankind? And why was it that Christ had to take away the sins of the world? So that being said, let me just tell you the situation. The point of the music, of course, is that we may fortify our spirit to be able to address the very, very real crisis facing mankind. Let me also say, as I think those of you watching my program are aware, I'm telling you these things not because I hate the United States, like some so-called liberal, and we've all discovered that the liberals are not terribly liberal these days, but because the United States was founded as a republic against empire, against the evil, murderous policies of the British Empire. And our nation is committed to its foundation in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence to that sacred principle of the general welfare. So first, on the war danger with Russia, many Americans may not be aware that we currently have 4,000 troops in Ukraine as part of a 10,000 troop NATO deployment. I'm not going to spend time here going through the 2013-2014 coup in Ukraine, which was funded to the tune of $5 billion by the Obama-Biden administration. But suffice it to say that we funded a violent mob to overthrow the elected government of Ukraine and replace it with one which is dominated by, or at least sympathetic to, neo-Nazi elements. That is simply a fact, and you can research it. So now we have 10,000 troops in Ukraine, and Russia feels this is a threat. I am going to read to you what Putin said at, only in part, he gave a 4-hour press conference 2 days ago, but I think it's worth Americans considering this. He said, quote, in this connection, and he said, we are concerned about unconditional guarantees for Russia's security today and in the historical perspective. In this connection, we have made it clear that any further movement of NATO to the east is unacceptable. Is there anything unclear about this? Are we deploying missiles on the US border? No, we are not. It is the United States that has come to our home with its missiles and is already standing at our doorstep. Is it going too far to demand that no strike systems be placed near our home? What is so unusual about this? What would the Americans say if we stationed our missiles on the border between Canada and the United States, or between Mexico and the United States? Which country owned California and Texas? Have you forgotten? All right, nobody is talking about this now the way they are talking about Crimea. So I would ask Americans, how do you think we would respond or should respond if Russia were placing missile systems on the border between the US and Canada, or in Mexico. I think we know something about this from the Cuban Missiles Crisis, which was not even as close as we currently are to the border of Russia with our deployments in Ukraine and the Baltics and Romania, etc. We have broken the promises that were made by then Secretary of State James Baker III and Reagan to Gorbachev when the Berlin Wall came down. And this is why the Russians are saying that nothing less than a written legal treaty agreement will be acceptable today. And there are certain lines which they will not allow to be crossed. Putin already said that the ethnic cleansing of 500,000 ethnic Russian people in Donetsk and Lugansk on the east, former now breakaway republics from Ukraine, is something that he will simply not allow to occur. And if people would study the history of what happened to Napoleon and what happened to Hitler in Russia, I think you might think twice before saying we should threaten Russia with a nuclear first strike, which is what the lunatic Senator Wicker from Mississippi is saying. And I will add that Chuck Schumer has had absolutely nothing to say in response. And Schumer has been one of the people promulgating this Russiagate fraud for 5 years now, and he hasn't turned back on it. Now, in Afghanistan, you have a situation already mentioned. 95% of the population is food insecure. 9 million people are on the brink of death by starvation, but you also have COVID, you have diarrheal diseases, malaria, cholera, etc. It is absolutely a crime against humanity, especially after we have been fighting in that country really for 40 years, had a 20-year official occupation, and then walk away and steal their money on top of it. It is simply not acceptable. And the excuse that we don't like the Taliban or don't want to recognize the Taliban is not a reason to kill 23 million, that is 55% of the population currently living there. Now, in the United States, life expectancy has collapsed largely due to the pandemic, to COVID, and our insane non-coordinated response to it. Life expectancy was 78.8 overall average in 2019. It decreased to 77 in 2020. And it decreased by 3 years for the Hispanic population and 2.9 years for the Black population. Now, I've been reading the autobiography of Eleanor Roosevelt, which has some interesting insights, one of which she said that her husband Franklin had enormous faith in the vitality of the American people as he toured the country and saw the terrible hardship and the poor quality of the soil, which apparently he was rather an expert in matters like that. He said, nonetheless, he had a sense there was a real spirit in the American people which could be mobilized to overcome the Great Depression. And she said she believes that's where his saying, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," was inspired from that faith. Similarly, I believe that had we, and we could even do it now, taken an appropriate mobilization, as Helga Zepp-LaRouche has called for, that if you want to end pandemics, you have to get rid of poverty. You have to create a situation where every human being on the planet has a decent bottom line standard of health. That means clean drinking water. That means good nutrition. Suppose instead of handing out trillions of dollars of stimulus checks and outright bailouts to completely bankrupt, corrupt, criminal Wall Street financial interests, we had said, okay, look, maybe it's not the best thing to have tattoo parlors, nail salons. Maybe we have to practice social distancing, move things outside, but why don't we take this opportunity to modernize all the infrastructure in the United States? Why don't we replace those 100-year-old water mains in New York City? Why don't we build a modern transportation grid? How about ventilation? People may or may not be aware there was a terrible scandal in the NYCHA buildings in New York City, which house 400,000 people, that adequate ventilation was not built, and they had horrendous numbers of deaths in those buildings in the first wave of COVID. So supposing instead of handing out money to bail out rot, a fictitious bubble of garbage, we had actually taken the opportunity to completely transform the quality of the American workforce to one of productivity. Do you think the nation would be experiencing the division we're experiencing now? Do you think everybody would be killing themselves and each other? No, we would have come together in a sense of solidarity and mission to defeat a public health menace. Think of the pride of members of our National Guard and military if they were deployed to places in Africa and Asia and South America to build modern water and healthcare systems. Think of what young people would have learned to do besides playing killer video games had they been sent. And I understand now, and this again reflects the goodness of the American people. We have record numbers of young people who want to become nurses. We have terrible nursing shortages. Do you know we shut down 125 hospitals in the United States in the last 2 years? Is it a wonder that people doubt whether the government is committed to your health? China built 1,000 hospitals. We shut down 125 of them. Think about that. So had we mobilized, and it's not too late, we could do it now. You would find that the American population has an enormous reservoir of goodwill and talent to address this and to solve this crisis so it doesn't keep coming back wave after wave. We could harden the health infrastructure of the American people and the people around the world with certain very obvious basic measures in water, nutrition, basic infrastructure, and then work on groundbreaking research in treatments, vaccines, et cetera. You need the whole program, and I think people would mobilize to do this. Finally, let me just say that there's a Christmas miracle happening tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., which is the James Webb Telescope is being launched. And this telescope is going to give us a whole new perspective on our galaxy. And I would say with that, let's take this Christmas to develop a whole new perspective on the future of human civilization. Now, what we're going to be hearing is a Christmas carol performed, and all of the performers are friends of my campaign. Jennifer Pearl, soprano, and Milena Robinson on the piano, in Jesu Bambino by Pietro Jan. And then that is going to be followed by a beautiful 5-minute excerpt of a speech by Lyndon LaRouche from September 1st, 2001. Then we're going to be hearing excerpts from Handel's Messiah. The first will be soprano Michelle Aaron singing Rejoice. And then we're going to go back to 2011 when I was just beginning my chorus conducting career in the New York, New Jersey area. My husband doesn't know this, but we're going to be hearing him and Nancy Geis performing in 2011, again from the Messiah, the sting of sin is death, and the strength of sin is the law. And then we'll be concluding with the Hallelujah chorus. So I hope you find all of this enjoyable and thoughtful, and will work with me to ensure that 2022 is a year of victory for mankind. Thank you very much, and we will see you also on New Year's Eve.
When blossoms flowered amid the snows upon a winter night, was born the child, the Christmas rose, the King of love and light. The
On Saturday, September 1st, 2001, Lyndon LaRouche addressed an audience of more than 1,000 people at the annual Labor Day weekend conference of the Schiller Institute and International Caucus of Labor Committees in Northern Virginia. Last week, the LaRouche Connection presented the first hour of Mr. LaRouche's address, and we will now present the concluding 20 minutes of that speech.
So what do you live for? Do you live like an animal to go out with a whimper? Or do you live like a human being knowing that you are doing something, you are developing in yourself, something which will be transmitted to future generations to make humanity better in the future? You no longer are a little person living in a little neighborhood with a little mind, with little ambitions and little interests. You suddenly become a very big person because you have the minds of some of the greatest people in history before you live in you, in your replication of what exactly their act of discovery. You do things with pride to say, he was right. This was a great discovery. We've got to use it for mankind's benefit. You say, I've got to do something to make the future better for those who come after us. And I can die with a smile on my face. Because I've lived well. I've lived at peace with the greatest people of the past, or at least some of them. And I can live at peace with joy in the people of the future. I will live forever in this process. That's what it is to be human. And when you think like that, and look at other people like that, you don't have a problem. You may have problems, but that's fun. Because if problems force you to attack and solve problems, whether as an individual or in concert with others, that is fun. It's what the puppy does when the happy puppy is playing. The worst thing you can do to a puppy is not play with it. Make it angry. It gets bored. The worst thing you do to a horse is not play with it, not work with it. It gets bored. It's unhappy. May get sick and die on you. It has no purpose in life. Human beings have a different kind of play. It's that kind of play called cognition in respect to past and present, which makes an absolute moral difference, which defines the individual person as a creature made in the image of the Creator. When you think in those terms, then you think accordingly. Now, how do we get out of this mess? I've defined implicitly what the problem is. The problem is we are gripped by a system, a doomed system, a self-doomed system. This system, this financial monetary system, with its legal trappings such as Scalia, with its popular trappings such as popular opinion, this system, with its lack of sense of what humanity is, a lack of moral principle. There is no moral principle. If you don't have a sense of what humanity is, as I've described it, you have no morality. It's all mechanical. There's no morality in it. Morality involves passion. And passion, moral passion, is love for human beings. It's love for those who created people who went before you. It's love for those who are coming afterward. To do nothing shameful in the eyes of those who came before you, even if you disagree with them. And to do nothing which is not beneficial to the society that comes afterward. No, in Plato called this agape. The Apostle Paul referred to this repeatedly, as in 1 Corinthians 13, as agape. Don't get involved like crazy Pat Robertson or Jerry Fall with these do's and don'ts, single issues. Forget the single issues. Don't marry about a list of do's and don'ts. Paul says the same thing. This is fraud. Concentrate on agape, which is the essence of all morality. And when you have agape, you don't need any other code. except good judgment.
Rejoice, rejoice, rejoice greatly. Rejoice, O daughter of Zion. O daughter of Zion, rejoice, rejoice, O daughter of Zion, rejoice greatly. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee, cometh unto thee. He is the righteous Savior. And he shall speak peace unto the heathen. He shall speak peace. He shall speak peace. Peace. He shall speak peace unto the heathen. He is the righteous Savior, and he shall speak peace.